Hi, hello everybody. My name is Winnie, and tonight we are starting a new series called Racial Perceptions. And my co-host is going to be Cartessa Smith. And in just a few
Hello.
seconds, I'm going to let her introduce herself to you guys. So the new series, like I said, is called Racial Perceptions, and it's basically going to be a platform where we're going to come together to talk about race and how we perceive it. So, Cartessa, please introduce yourself to our viewers so we can get started.
Okay, well, hi everyone. My name is Cartessa, and I am a licensed professional counselor. I've kind of been in the scene, I'm fairly young. I've kind of been in the scene now for about 6 years doing counseling.
Hmm.
Um, I came to Winnie with this idea of racial perceptions after having some experiences lately with the different types of environments that are going on, or the different type of environment that is going on for different people and what it looks like to different people of different
Hmm.
races. So we came up with this idea and thought that it would be a great platform for us to come and talk about those hard topics
Hmm.
that uh, we don't really get to send clear communication and receive communication on. So basically, that's what I would like to do here today. Have those conversations, get those questions out there, talk about, my experiences, and listen, maybe, and learn.
Hmm.
So I'm super excited to be here, and I'm super excited about the topic more than anything. So,
Right. Yeah, me too. I'm so excited that you're going to be co-hosting this with me. And I would like to invite everyone watching to please participate in this conversation. You can drop us comments and, just engage with us. We want to hear from you and we want to hear
absolutely.
your thoughts. I also want to let everybody know that we would like for these conversations to be productive and respectful. So, as such, we're asking you to please leave inappropriate and destructive comments out. If it's not going to move this discussion forward, then please leave them out. So that being said, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Tonight we're talking about privilege, specifically white privilege, and we're gonna be talking about some of our experiences as far as how we understand privilege and white privilege. This is understandably a very uncomfortable topic for a lot of people, and it's also a very complex topic. So we may not even get through all of it tonight. And if we don't, that's okay. We're going to be doing this weekly. So if we don't touch on everything tonight, we'll continue the conversation next week. So, Cartessa, I'm going to hand it over to you. Where would you like to start with this wonderful conversation about privilege
With
and
the
white privilege?
wonderful conversation
Yeah,
about white privilege.
it's a very
Well,
wonderful conversation.
it is, it should be. And I
Mhm.
think that is kind of where I want to jump in. When people think, and when you and I were talking about this the other day,
Mhm.
and you said something that was pretty profound. You were like, people think of privilege as a negative. People are looking at having privilege as something that is a bad thing. And I took that to heart and I really like that really resonated. And I think that the term white privilege is something that uh, has like some sort of negative
Mhm.
connotation, and people
Mhm.
are like, "Oh, well, that's not me. I don't have," like it's something that is a bad thing. And because of that, we've had a lot of resistance just for
Mhm.
even the term, and I think that that hurts us as a community, as a country,
Mhm.
because there are certain things that you and I were talking about, our own
Mhm.
privilege.
Right.
And I think that if I can recognize my privilege and you can recognize yours, and then we can take that and understand that we could potentially, we can potentially cause someone else to struggle
Mhm.
because of it. I think that that is the key to really getting into the the topic, the
Right. Right.
racial the racial disparity with white privilege. You
Mhm.
have people, oh, white privilege doesn't exist. Um, and then you have other perceptions, racial, that are like, yes, it very much so
Mhm.
exists. And because it exists, I'm discriminated against, I'm profiled, I'm harmed, I'm murdered. I mean,
Mhm.
these are things that on the other side of the spectrum,
Mhm.
um, are being talked about, and it's not being heard. We're not communicating it. And it's difficult being on one side of the spectrum to see the other side and to see their perception. And it's such an
Mhm.
eye opener because I'm like, I understand how you could be a middle class white male and think this isn't privilege. I
Mhm.
have a job and I have a mortgage, and this isn't privilege. And I can understand how you could be on the other side
Mhm.
and think, you know, that's very much so privilege. And the complication that I have with it is, how are we going to get that together? How can you meet in the middle with that?
Right. Right.
It's
Yeah,
hard.
and I really like what you said about each one of us understanding the privileges that we have and trying to understand other people from that viewpoint. So, kind of like I was sharing with you the other day, I I've been able to recognize some of the privileges that I've been able to enjoy, and at the
Right.
same time, being able to recognize those things have helped me to be a better therapist,
Right.
a better life
Mhm.
coach, just a better person in general, because it's helped me to understand where other people are coming from. So
Right.
just to be very transparent with you and to our viewers, I'm Haitian American, like a lot of my viewers know. And growing up, I heard a lot of people tell me and my brothers that we were very privileged.
Right.
And that offended me
Right.
because I was like, what do you mean
Like, no
I'm
way.
privileged? And for
Right.
me, hearing them say that you guys are very privileged, I thought I took that to mean they were telling me that we weren't working hard, things were being handed to us, and we just, we're kind of just strolling through life without any of our own challenges and struggles and everything like that. So it wasn't until a few years ago, actually, when I started really do some soul searching to try to understand a lot of things, and putting my life into perspective, and just to learn and grow, that I started understanding what the people in the community meant when they said that. So, to give you some perspective, my brothers and I grew up in Haiti. So, pretty much Creole speaking community, but we went to an American school. So, for all purposes, we pretty much grew up within the American culture as well. We learned the language. Our entire schooling from pre-K to high school was done in English. So when we moved to the States for college, it was pretty much a seamless transition from high school into college, like any other student here in the States would experience. And so one thing that I heard a lot was, how a lot of the Haitian Americans and the Haitians who had been living in the States for so long weren't necessarily making a lot of progress, weren't successful enough because they weren't meeting those standards that society call, success or whatever. And so this is something that I heard from family, from friends, and it was just this mindset that these people who've been living in this country for so long must not be doing everything they need to be doing for them to get ahead or whatever. And so when I actually took the time to understand what that meant and what that meant for me, what I realized was here I was, um a teenager moving to the States and just continuing on with my life, going to
Right.
college and doing everything like that. And then you also have other immigrants who may not necessarily know how to speak English when they get here, or they don't they didn't have the experience of getting immersed within the American culture before moving here. So what they ended up having to do was basically start over. Whereas for myself, because of the privilege that I had to get the education that I did had, and these privileges weren't necessarily things that I did anything to get. They they were basically based on decisions that my parents made. And
Right.
so now that I got to the point where I understood, this is the privilege that I have. So who am I to look down on another person or on another immigrant who, for
Absolutely.
whatever reason, I'm thinking, this person should be doing X, Y, and Z with their life already. Why aren't they doing that? But then when you look at it, me and another immigrant may not have started out at the same level. So the playing field wasn't necessarily leveled from the get-go. And so when I understood that, it widened my view, and it actually gave me the opportunity to help non-English speaking immigrants in any way that I could. So that's kind of how I see some of the privileges, playing out in my life. But then, like, when you look at white privilege, I think that white privilege becomes an issue when it's not recognized, because then someone is getting an advantage or some kind of special treatment or whatever based on nothing but the color of their skin, or someone is being
Right.
discriminated against just based on the color of their skin, which I think, and I feel like that's
That's a whole,
really
yeah,
not okay.
that's
That's
a
that's not okay
whole
at all.
topic. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a whole topic. Uh,
Mhm.
I think that you're absolutely right, and you're one of the people, and I'm happy to say that that number is growing, that is using their privilege to um, help, to
Mhm.
advocate, to you said that you were like, I would go in stores and there would be older people that,
Mhm.
that were speaking Creole and couldn't speak English. So
Yeah.
instead of just being like, oh well, you should know how to speak English, this is America,
Right.
you were like, hey, can I translate for you? How that is not an issue. I mean, that's not, that's kind of more going towards, mending the problem or meeting towards
Mhm.
the middle. It's not something that you had to do, but yet it's something that you chose to do for your
Right.
empathy, realizing that you did have this privilege. And I saw the comment there. That's what we call equity. And I think that that
I
is a
agree.
great comment. In order for equity to occur, empathy
Mhm.
has to be there. Like we
Mhm.
have to know that someone's going to need more than someone else,
Right.
and we have to be okay with that. Or
Right.
we have to know that someone is going to start further back than someone else, and we
Mhm.
have to be okay with that. And I think equity is a great
Mhm.
idea in the process of this whole thing. It's unfortunate that still to this day we have so many people include, and I'm not just talking about white privilege, even though that's the taboo word. When we say white privilege, it's
Everybody kind of gets
no, it's
offended,
like,
yeah.
it's not, "Oh, the situation is not
Mhm.
cool, and I don't wanna talk about politics," and, um, I, I have a friend that I've had and this is an incident that actually occurred on Facebook.
Mm.
So, I have a friend that I've had for many years, very smart, professional woman, white woman.
Mhm.
I made a post about white privilege, and this is a good friend of mine. There is no love lost there.
Mhm.
Um, she actually was the one who catapulted me because of the relationship that I had with her to think about the fact that she is really um, genuine in her approach and her
Mhm.
idea of
Mhm.
that there is no white privilege and that what she has gone through or the barriers to her life are equal to that of people from other races.
Mhm.
So she gets on the post and she says she makes a comment that she doesn't agree with white privilege. She's like, Cartess said this, I don't agree with this, and of course, I have other friends who are, very on the other side of the
Mhm.
spectrum of white privilege. They immediately, get on the post, and you know how Facebook is. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, you're wrong, and, oh my goodness, and whatever. So
Mhm.
it immediately gets political and it immediately gets divisive,
Mm.
right? One thing I noticed though is that all the people that were involved in the conversation besides myself were white. And so
Hmm.
you had people that understood white privilege, and then you had my friend who I've known and cared about for quite who genuinely is like, no, I had to work until my fingers bled. And
Mm. Mhm.
um, I, am drowning in student loan debt. And I, like, where is this privilege? And so
Mhm.
I'm like, wow, she, she is really, she really, really, believes this. And then she says this, she says, you know what? I I love Cartessa very much, and I've probably known her longer than
Mm.
anyone else, excuse me, arguing with me on this post, and I would vote for Cartessa for president. I am not, yeah, she
Mhm.
said, she said that. She's like, I am not here to argue with her and lose a friend. I don't care what happens in the world. And
Mhm.
that told me right then. She absolutely believes her
Mhm.
perception is that there is no white privilege.
Mhm.
Where does
Well,
that go in a world
mhm.
where my perception is there absolutely is white
Right,
privilege?
right,
You
right.
know, where do
Yeah,
we go
and
then?
the thing I think that gets very confusing for a lot of people and that kind of puts people on the defensive, I think is what I think is that some people hear privilege or white privilege and assume that you're telling them they never worked hard or they never
Right.
struggled or they never had to do anything to get to where they're at. And
Right.
that couldn't be further from the truth. And
Right.
until
Absolutely.
I understood what that meant for me is when I started understanding, why people get defensive when they hear, oh, you have privilege or you have white privilege. It doesn't mean that you didn't struggle. I mean, just because my my struggles were different from somebody else, or just because I didn't struggle in a particular area, doesn't mean that I never struggled. I mean, I work hard, and I have all these different challenges that I've had to overcome and continue to work hard to overcome, but it still doesn't negate the fact that I do have some privileges that other people don't. And until I can recognize that,
Right.
then I don't think that we're gonna go anywhere. And I kind of feel like that's where the conversation about white privilege becomes so divisive, is because people just hear, oh, white privilege, you're telling me that I didn't work hard for anything.
Right.
That's not what I mean by it. And I don't think that's what the majority of people using the term white privilege means by it.
And there's a lot of pushback with that.
Hmm.
It's not the climate that we're in now is so hyper focused on, and rightfully so, in my personal opinion,
Mm,
hyper focused on African American, just African American civil rights issues.
mm,
It's a hot topic right now. It's the
mhm,
topic of the country. So when someone I see ran, there's also people who just want acknowledgement that there's more types of privilege than just white privilege. Absolutely.
I
Like I
agree with that.
absolutely, yes.
I
I
agree with that.
I think that where we have that disconnect is because right now, in this climate, in this environment, in this 2020, what a year, but
Mhm,
right now, African American civil liberties are what is being addressed, and the term
mhm,
white privilege um, was birthed from aggression, from pain,
mhm,
and it was, I mean, it's not something that was intended to feel good. African Americans weren't like, oh, you have white privilege,
mhm.
great. It's like, hey, we're going to coin this term for what we see happening and what we experience,
Right.
and that does
Mhm.
not take away anybody else's experience. It doesn't
Not
take
at
away
all.
anybody else's um, struggles or
Mhm,
barriers,
mhm,
or achievements that they've had and made in their life.
mhm,
Um, it makes it even more difficult to focus on the origin of the
mhm,
term white privilege, that because of the fact that people are like, there's multiple different types of privileges and everyone is privileged in some way. Absolutely. Right now we want unity,
right.
and white privilege is that barrier.
Mhm,
Just the term is that wall that is keeping us from moving forward you
mhm,
know
mhm.
um you have people, why don't white people just admit that they have privilege? Do they have to? Are they, I mean,
I
do
mean,
they have
that's
to?
I
I'm asking. I want to know, do they
yeah,
have
like
to?
I want to know too. And to a certain extent, I think yes, like you have to get to a point where you acknowledge and recognize that you have this type of privilege that a lot of the times, turns into literally discrimination against other people based on the color of their skin. And that's
Exactly.
that's the issue. I shared this on my Facebook page the other day. This is something that just happened to my brother like a couple days ago. He went to the bank to make a deposit, and the teller was basically like, you know, can you pull your mask down so I can see your face? Can you show me your ID? Like had him go through this entire process for him to make a deposit. And so after this whole process, the teller tells my brother, I had to double check that this account belonged to you because your savings account doesn't match your face. And so my brother was like, what do you mean by that? And the teller was like, well, it's because, you know, you're young and you're black. So it's that association of, you know, you're a black person,
Yeah.
you're young. Why are you able to have X, Y, and Z? Why
Right.
are you able to drive the car that you drive or own the home that you own or
Right.
own, you know, the purse that you own, whatever the case may be? And there's this question of how did you gain the success that you have now? Did you actually work for it, or did you just, you know, sell drugs or rob people? Like I almost always feel like when um a black person is successful, at least in my everyday life with people that I've talked to, there's always this kind of suspicion as to how you got what you got, you know, like as to how you got to where you are now. But when they look at the white person, it's kind of expected that, you know, the white person would have money in their account or they would be driving um this make and model or whatever. But when a black person is doing it, there's like this kind of surprise behind it.
Yeah,
So I
definitely.
think that, you know, like that's where the issue of not recognizing and acknowledging that white privilege is an issue. Like that's where I think there really needs to be acknowledgement of it, and so that way people can actually do something about that. Like when as a white person you see a black or Hispanic or whatever the person's color is being discriminated against because of their skin color, you have a responsibility to, you know, say something, to do something, because this is a fellow human being regardless of the differences of your skin
Right.
color.
Yeah. I mean, that's very true. I could go and I have two older brothers, and I could
Mhm,
go into, they would kill me, but I could go into
mhm,
the stories that they have had with not only other white people, but just like run-ins with the law. You know,
mhm,
I won't. I'll let them do that one day. But
mhm,
um, you want to talk about racially profiled? Now these are black men, um, and they have good jobs. They work very hard, and it is uh, a huge burden to them to be. And I have to. I mean, I have to watch it. Not very often. We're not with each other every day, all day. We
right.
have families, but I know that they witness that they're going through it, and I can bear witness even
Mhm,
to some of the things that they've had to go through. So, yes, I do believe wholeheartedly, and let me say again, make no mistake, that white privilege does exist.
mhm,
However, I think our issue, if we're going into that systemic approach, is that the perspective is skewed. And when you look at someone's perspective, and I mean, this is what this series is about. We're
mhm,
getting to the point where we're saying those tough things, and I'm here as a black woman and I'm saying these tough things. There are some people that aren't going to have that perspective, that
mhm,
awareness, that thought process that me as
mhm,
a black woman has, or my brothers, or my mother, or my father have.
mhm,
Um, and I think that that's a huge burden to the plight of this whole ordeal. You know, you have Black Lives Matter and it's divisive. You have Blue Lives Matter and it's divisive. And people aren't wanting to give that equity, like someone earlier commented. People aren't wanting to put that energy in to build that equity, to actually unify the country. It's more so, well, I didn't go through that. So I don't have any knowledge of that. And okay, so I didn't go through that, but I went through this. And I saw a comment from Mixed Emotions page, and I think that might be my brother. He said that white privilege doesn't mean you haven't struggled in life. It means you haven't struggled due to your race and ethnicity. And that is absolutely 100% correct. That's absolutely correct. But how can you tell someone that has struggled that, oh, you haven't struggled as much as you should have because you're white, or you haven't struggled as much as I have because you're white? That's a hard pill to swallow. And it would be difficult, it would be difficult to get to that place where okay, so we're talking about what you went through, we're talking about what I've went through. We can we can swap stories. Are we going to be at a stalemate here? Like, if you think about the Civil War or the Jim Crow era, all these topics were hot topics. And then okay, so now we're at the BLM, Black Lives Movement. All these errors of situations were hot topics about situations that people did not understand and that were divisive. And you had millions of people that did not understand why there should not be slaves, or why there should be desegregated schools, or why interracial couples should marry. And still to this day, then you have people on the other side of that spectrum that have that different perspective, that I can't show you my perspective. I can't make you feel, can I? I can't make you feel what I feel, It's a process. So, yes, make no mistake, I absolutely agree that there needs to be accountability for white privilege, because it causes strife, and it's dangerous, it's deadly in some points, in some situations. So I think that looking at it from that systemic view, I think it's way more hidden than people realize. So when people are like, why is this progress so slow, and why do we still have, why do we have certain politicians, or why do we have certain things work out the way that they do? Everybody should think this way. When you have a great deal of people that have had a completely different life and outlook and a perspective. And so I think that talking about that, and talking and respecting that person's life and their experiences, both sides could help lift the burden a little, and could ease for some understanding. So I feel like if I'm against Blue Lives Matter, then I'm a radical or a leftist. And if I'm against Black Lives Matter, then oh my goodness, as a Black woman, what does that mean? Like, I'm ostracized. So there's just not a lot of room for self-awareness.
Right. There's definitely a lot of layers to this conversation, for sure. And I just wanted to touch on what you said, when you were talking about how when someone talks about their struggle, then there's another side saying, well, I have been through this, this, and that. And I think that at the end of the day, it's not about comparing whose struggles were greater and who didn't struggle. I think that at the end of the day, it should be about recognizing that this person or this group of people went through something, and it needs to be acknowledged and recognized, and there needs to be, respectful dialogues for people to actually listen, instead of listening for the purpose of having a rebuttal ready.
Yes. Yeah.
So that being said, we're kind of running out of time. This was such a great conversation, and a great start to our series. We're going to be wrapping up, but everybody who's watching, please feel free to continue with the conversation in the comments, and we will be back next week at the same time. So please invite your friends to
Yes.
come and join us, be a part of this conversation.
Yes.
We'll probably keep talking about the same topic next week, just so we can kind of wrap it up before we move on to something else. So thank you guys so much for um,
Yay. This was
being here tonight.
amazing.
Thank you, Cartessa, for co-hosting this with me, and we will see you guys next week.
We will see you next week.
All
Better
right, bye
tune in.
everybody. Bye, Cartessa.
Bye.